Welcome back to season 5 of Love is Blind. Here we are, and where they said that we're going to have some twists and turns, they weren't lying. But in this first video, I want to go over each of the 14 key people, their attachment style, and talk about what works and doesn't in the pod. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about them as a couples. So make sure you watch both of these. Welcome to Reality TV Therapy with me, Dr. Diane. If you're new to my channel, Reality TV Therapy, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Diane Strakowski. I have some new followers, and I follow reality dating shows for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm a licensed psychologist. It's called media psychology. I'm not here to diagnose anyone or treat anyone, but I'm using the media as examples because I think we can actually learn a lot about dating, about ourselves, about relationships from watching reality TV. How else do you learn about how to act on dates? How else do you learn how to deepen your relationship but through examples? Now, I can't, as a licensed psychologist, use examples of my own clients. So for me, it's a natural blend to use the people that we see on our screen. But I want to give you something different than the tea, and I just don't want this to be another channel with a recap. I really want you to come away from these videos with some bit of information about yourself, some kind of learning that you can figure out, what am I doing? If I have a similar attachment style to this person on the screen, what can I learn about myself? So that's the whole reason why I started my channel. But I'm asking you for something. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button, that you like all my videos, and that you comment on them because the algorithm then pushes this out to other people. And I want, first off, if you've been following me, that I would love for there to be therapists behind the scenes, not to mess up the storyline, but to really help these people. It's not just about finding love, it's really then about after the cameras are off to continue that love as well. So the more people that understand this, the more that we talk positively about psychology. I just think it's such a journey for people, and I think there's just valuable lessons. Now, if you're also interested in attachment theory, I have a whole other channel. I'm going to link that in the notes, where I talk about attachment theory. I talk about Dr. John Bowlby. I talk about something called the strange situation, how attachment theory was developed, how it's measured, and the different types. But I'm not going to go over all of that here. If you'd like to, please go check out my other channel. I don't post much there, but that's really the foundational work, and I just wanted you to know that that's there. Okay, so let's go back to Love is Blind. I've got my gold goblet here because I really love some things and hate some things about the show. I'll just put that out there. Now, also, Love is Blind put out a statement on Entertainment News. They warned us that season 5 was going to be a season unlike any other. And at this point, I'm just going to imagine that you have watched all 4 episodes and you are caught up to date. So I'm not spoiling anything here. But I have to tell you my first initial impressions, and I've watched it twice now, all 4 episodes twice. I feel like we're heavy on the drama, and I'm worried about what love stories are actually going to come out about this. But I've also heard, because I know some of the cast from previous seasons, that they thought season 4 was actually too much love. Can you believe that? The producers thought too much love, they need more drama. And that's why we're seeing the drama. And I have issues with some of that, but I don't want to bore you with all of my thoughts about it. I want to just get to the meat about it. Okay, so let's go back to the season starts. Vanessa and Nick Lachey, who are still there because they had gotten some negative press that last reunion that we had season 4 where everything went haywire and it didn't come live. There was negative press about them, but they casted and filmed season 4 and 5 together. Okay, that's what they do. They take 2 seasons and do them close together in terms of the taping. It's when they're released much later. So there were no changes made at this point. But how it starts and how all the shows start is that everyone agrees, because these people have been out there dating. This season, it's in Houston. They've been dating in Houston and realized that online dating sucks. Okay, can I just say that? It sucks. It's difficult. Online dating has gotten worse with applications like Tinder, where it's a swipey world and we call it the paradox of choice. But everyone agrees that it's very superficial. That's why you go on the show. You go on the show because you want something else. You want someone to really fall in love with you, see who you are, and choose you for you, not because you have blonde hair, not because you're a particular race or a particular size or anything else, but really who you are. So I get the premise. I get why people go. And there are different people, right? You know, there might be some people who go on the show because they are very attractive and they hate that people don't get to know them on a deeper level. That's one type of person who goes on the show. Another type of person who goes on the show might be someone who really wants love, but they've been judged negatively. And we start to hear that this season, right? Like, oh, I'm bald. People aren't attracted to me. There might be someone's weight issue. They might not be very tall or very muscular or by classic standards attractive. So those are the second type of people who go on the show. And then there's a third type. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree with this. There's the third type of person, we're going to get into it, is the person that leads with some, shall I say, challenging personalities. That they're a little bit too much or not enough. And that's the type of person that might not have luck in real world dating because unbeknownst to them, they might be flooding people. They might not be giving enough. So it's less about their looks or attractiveness, but maybe something about their personality. Okay. Having said all of that, I want to start with someone who's probably the most controversial person, and that's Lydia. I did a reel on this. I broke down everybody's attachment style. I'm going to go over that again. Lydia, she is 31 years old. She's the geologist. She is from Puerto Rico. She leads with that. So I'm just saying what Lydia says about herself. But Lydia, to me, in terms of her energy and in terms of her bio and what she writes about herself and what we see that she's even saying about herself, that people have said that she's too much. And she doubles down on that, right? She's out there, girls are slapping her butt. She's saying, I'm a lot and I'm looking for a man who can handle me. Now, she also cloaks it in saying that she's looking for someone emotionally available, right? If she's an emotional person, I call that an anxious attachment style. She's looking for someone who's going to be able to handle her, right? So what I find interesting about Lydia is that as a package, though, she's got a lot going for her, okay? She's a geologist. She has a career. She's 31. I'm guessing she's dated a bit. Now, we find out later that she might be living here alone or not have a lot of extended family here, so that might be a challenge for her. But she's done really well in school. She's gotten great grades. She's really smart. We see these dialogues about rocks and science. But she's looking for someone, my guess, because she says she's looking for kind of a nerd. She's looking for a nerd who's also emotionally available. I'm married to a scientist, a little bit of a nerd, and he does have some emotional availability, but it's not common. I'm just going to say that. So I think for Lydia, it's going to be a hard find. She's going to actually have to date a lot of people because of who she's looking for. If she's looking for someone who can keep up with her intellectually, and the good news about the sciences, there are a lot of men in the sciences. But the part that's hard is that those men are also usually more on the introverted side, a little bit more quiet. They're not like the salesman type, the Izzy types, right? They're usually not as verbal. So I understand why Lydia's actually struggling, because she's kind of an oxymoron. She's sort of a mix. She's this anxiously attached person who needs validation, who needs love, who needs a lot of reassurance. And she's also highly expressive. She leads with a lot. Some people are calling that desperate. I want to see it through the lens of attachment style that says she's really just looking for consistency. And she's going to be primed to being abandoned. She's going to be primed to feeling rejected. And she's going to be scanning the environment for consistency. And when somebody's not consistent, because that's what an anxious person does, and I was an anxious person too, that's going to be really difficult for her. But needless to say, I like all the cast. I can't say that I like somebody more than any others. Just in terms of her anxiety, I feel like Lydia needs to do some work about that, like validating herself, calming down. But she's certainly leading with a lot of energy that could flood people. I don't know if they're going to call it flooding, but it's a little bit like when you come in loud and kind of announce who you are. It's only going to be a super confident guy, and we're going to see more about her and Milton, that can really kind of handle her. Okay, but she leads with she's single because she hasn't found somebody who is that type. And I think there's a little bit more there to it. Okay, so I'm going to get to all the other things about her choices, but I like that Lydia's smart. She's got some strengths there, but I really have to say that Lydia's energy is going to be a tough one for many of the men. And we're going to get into a little bit later too, the difference between somebody who's emotionally available versus someone who's verbal. Okay, and if you know anything about love languages and emotional intelligence, you're going to know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's Lydia. Let me leave it there. We're going to see all kinds of messiness. And I knew that. I predicted that on my reel, just looking at the profile and knowing that they were showing her a lot. We knew that this was going to be messy. Okay, let's go to my second person, and that's Aaliyah. I really like Aaliyah. I think she's, 27, 28. Aaliyah is an ICU nurse, also scientific, very smart, not quite as nerdy as Lydia, but she's really, again, a solid person if you just look at it. I think she's very attractive. She does lead with a lot of her hurt, though. And we see that later with the coupling where she's very scared to be hurt and to be abandoned. And I think she's been hurt before, as we all have, right? But she's leading with a lot of that. And I think that can work against her because she's afraid to take a risk, right? And that's what the show is. This experiment is clearly a risk. But as a person, and I'll say what the strengths I like about Aaliyah, she's not quite so highly expressive. It feels like she does some introverted things. Go to her Instagram page. She's actually a singer. Beautiful voice. She plays guitar, as she mentions to Uche. She does her art. She wants to listen, read poetry. So there's almost like an introverted quality to Aaliyah that she needs her girl cave. And I think a lot of women can relate to that. Again, she's also seems very empathic. She really, her and Lydia, who I think it's like the sixth relationship here. I did a post on that on Instagram too. If you're not following me there, make sure you do. Back to Love Doc, about how I think these two have their own relationship, right? Lydia and Aaliyah. It feels like some love bombing to me because it's really too hot, too fast, too soon, and I worry about some boundaries. But Aaliyah actually seems to have better boundaries than Lydia. She is really sweet to the other women, though. I think as a nurse, she has a lot of empathy and a lot of love to give. But I think she is, again, just a little bit quieter. She's looking for a special love. We find out more about Aaliyah with the whole cheating episode, that she's also a sexual person. Love that she's just, this is who I am, this is what my needs are. But I think there's a little element of anxiety. Again, fear of rejection. She said it herself in her profile that she overthinks. But for me, and how I differentiate these things, she has some anxiety, much lower level anxiety, but she's more like a low expressive person, and Lydia's a high expressive person. So though they have the similar flavor, their presentation is a little bit different. Now, before we go on, if you don't know who you are, it's really important that you do. Go to my website after you watch this video, backtolovedog.com, and take my love style quiz, or on Instagram, just go to link in my bio. It'll take you right to my quiz. You too will understand. Am I an anxious type also? Does this resonate with me? Am I low expressive? Am I high expressive? Because not only have I taken attachment theory, I'm looking at also your communication style, high versus low expressive. If you're high expressive, you've got different things to work on. If you're low expressive, different things to work on. So check that out, and then in the comments, let me know who you are, because I think that's fascinating how you're going to see things too. Okay, let's move on to the third woman, Stacy. I think Stacy is a green flag. I don't like to use red flags really, because I worry about the language of that, but there's a lot of things that I think Stacy is doing right, in particular for being on TV. These shows, by the way, cast usually the anxious type of women because they're the ones who are more eager to find love. But Stacy's 34. She is directors of operation. But Stacy's also objectively a very attractive person. She's very lean. She's very fit. She probably gets really good feedback on the outside world. Like, I'm guessing that a lot of men fall for Stacy because she seems a little bit like a guy's girl too. Like, she's fun, she's playful, she can play golf, toss her around and dance with her. I mean, there's parts of Stacy that are just more playful, more vibrant. So I don't think that Stacy has any problems dating in the real world. But I get the sense that maybe people don't really give Stacy a chance. They might project onto her, oh, she's just this blonde. And I do feel like Stacy holds her own. I think when it comes to attachment styles that Stacy has a secure functioning style. I would call her secure Sophia. I'll call her secure Stacy, because she's not getting rocked like the other women, if you notice. She's not also playing into all the competition, and she's kind of just staying in her lane. That's what a confident person does. Doesn't get so caught up in the drama or the noise. She even says to Izzy, like, if you're my person, I'm not worried about these other people. And again, I'm guessing lots of men, we don't see all this production because we don't see everything, but I'm guessing other men are falling for Stacy. And that's why Izzy, by the way, we'll get to that, likes her, because she is a woman in demand. Okay. But Stacy is really, in some ways, more solid. And what I mean by that is there's a mix. Okay. There's a mix of soft and hard and light and cold. And she knows how to pace herself. Okay. When Izzy says, I'm not sure you're being that vulnerable with me, she's like, yeah, well, maybe I'm not, but like, we'll get there. And then what works for Stacy is she doesn't lead with her whole story, because I don't think she has a story. I don't think she has as much pain or hurt as maybe, say, Johnie or even Lydia. Again, she's had more positive experiences where things have worked for her. So she doesn't have that same kind of trauma history. But what she does is, again, it builds over time, like trust. We have to have a foundation, and her confidence comes across that way. And then, in terms of the timing, we're going to talk about this, the vulnerability builds. So I'm not leading with, blah, here's everything that I'm going to tell you about. I'm pacing it out. I'm giving you more. I'm peeling the onion, so to speak, about going deeper as it fits. This is why I think Stacy, of all the women this season, she's kind of right in the pocket, so to speak. She's got that it factor where she knows who she is, she knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to ask for it or get it. Okay, let me know what you think about Stacy if you agree. Okay, next, Taylor. Taylor, another blonde, really sweet, younger, 26, kindergarten teacher. Taylor does lead with a little bit of sensitivity about an ex having cheated on her before. Relationships haven't worked out. So she comes at it a little bit more like Lydia, a little bit more, and Johnie, a little bit more wounded, a little bit more anxious. But I feel like Taylor's motivations are more like, I really want to get married, have a family, have kids. And that to me makes sense because she's a school teacher. She's around little kids. When you are working with little children, it's like you want one of your own. I kind of get that about Taylor. And I don't feel like Taylor has any huge skeletons in her closet. In the first 4 episodes, at least, I haven't heard that. But she is kind and she's sweet. And sweet butt, is that what JP calls her? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. But there's like, again, like a sweetness to Taylor. However, someone, again, who goes on the show is going to be more anxiously kind of driven. And I don't use the term anxious ambivalent, which is the classic attachment style, because I don't think anxious people are ambivalent per se. I think they definitely want love. And she's more the nervous type. And we're going to see that when we get to her and JP, especially the reveal. Remember, she says like, my heart is pounding, feel my heart. But that's what a nervous person feels, highly sensitive to their nervous system, their heart rate. She's paying attention to JP's sigh. You're sighing, do a push-up, right? She's paying attention very close. But I wondered again what Taylor's experience in the real world was. Like, is there a little bit of something that didn't work well for her? She said in the ITM, the In the Moment interview, that she'd had some hurts and then she let herself go. And I wondered about that in terms of her presentation. And so she's coming at it still with some hurt. And that's not often the best position to be in coming into this, because you really need to have a little bit more confidence. So I wanted Taylor to have more confidence, but she's a good listener and I think she's sweet. Okay, let's go to Johnie, the 5th woman. What do I think about Johnie? I think a lot about Johnie, a little bit like I do Lydia. Though Johnie probably is a little bit more like Aaliyah on the low expressive side of the anxious scale. Okay, but Johnie leads with a lot of vulnerability. And good, bad, or otherwise, I'm going to talk about why this works or doesn't when we get to video 2, which is the couples. But she talks about that she labels herself, I'm a walking red flag. Ooh, if this is you and you're a walking red flag, meaning you've had a lot of failed relationships, be careful what you say about yourself. And if Johnie was watching this, I'd say be careful that you're already telling people about yourself. If I lead in any conversation and say, I'm not very good at this, I suck at relationships, I'm not very smart, I'm I'm a klutz, whatever it is. I almost call attention to that in a negative way. And I think Johnie, all of this is unconscious, and there's clearly been hurt here because Johnie talks about even my mother doesn't think that I might be a relationship worthy person. And I thought, oh God, Johnie, I'm so sorry to have this negativity. What I want for Johnie is, and she's an attorney. She's smart and accomplished in other ways. And even then, who was it? Somebody had mentioned, oh, you're an attorney. I think it was Chris, right? Oh, I should be intimidated. No, don't be intimidated. All I do is the paperwork. Instead of like, thank you. Yeah, I've worked hard for my career. I'm accomplished, but in relationships, my law background has nothing to do with it. Like, that's what I would say. So I don't want Johnie to be apologizing for herself. And it feels that way. We're going to get to it because of her history, because of being with a drug-addicted partner, then being married to someone as a rebound that she wasn't really in love with. There's a lot of complexity to Johnie. But if you ever went on Love is Blind, let me just tell you this. Don't lead with your red flags. Do not lead with your negativity. Don't lead with, I have trouble getting into relationships because I'm unlovable or I'm too much. What happens is you have to think of your audience. How are they going to interpret it? So now I'm with someone who's a walking red flag. What does that mean about me? Okay, you get to craft a story for how someone sees you. You want to lead with your best assets. I'm an attorney. I've done well in school. I'm an accomplished person, but I'm looking for love. I'm looking for a partner to partner with me. And yeah, that's what I do for work, but I'm also fun. I like to do this, that. Like, I just didn't hear that. I'm sure she talked about it, but I didn't hear enough positivity about Johnie, about what she does for fun. And so it feels like it leans too much with vulnerability without enough mix. Like Stacy has a mix of, we get to it in the timing, but a little bit more fun. And think about, what does the opposite sex want? They want probably a mix. So I just wanted to see more from Johnie, and it felt like she was just leading with too much. I need to know now that you're not going to hurt me like all the other men who have hurt me. And that's just way too much for any new partner to take on. So I was hoping that Johnie would speak more to the positivity and less to the hurt. Okay, let me know what you think about Johnie and if you agree. Anxious as well. And by the way, let me pause. Most of the women are anxious because I have data from 90,000 people who have taken my love style quiz, the same one I mentioned. And 46% of women, the most popular one, is anxious. Why? Because we have inconsistency in the parenting. It has nothing to do with you personally. It has to do with the environment you grew up in, the family you grew up in. I too grew up with I had 4 siblings. There wasn't a lot to go around. I think it was Johnie. Did she say that she had 6 siblings? Sometimes there's just not enough to go around. And so you come into relationships with so many expectations of your own that it's really hard to feel satisfied. Let's take a pause. I want to switch to the men now, who they are. I want to start with Uche. Uche is, 33, if I got that right. He says himself that he's blunt and needs to work on opening up. I actually really appreciate that about Uche. Overall, he reminds me of Brett from last season, Brett and Tiffany. Like, good-looking man, great physique. He's got to get positive feedback in the world. A little bit of a nerd, and his voice is not as masculine, maybe, as some of the other voices. But I think Uche just objectively has a lot going for himself. We're going to see that his own bluntness becomes an issue when we get into the depth here. But he's an interesting guy, right? Poetry, more that artsy kind of, again, nerdy sort of flair. So I think he could be a really interesting partner and an interesting guy who just is a little bit more mature. Okay, but the way that he dresses, beautiful watches, and his hair is coiffed, and nice clothes and shoes, I think objectively, again, the type of person, Uche, who would go on the show, is that the one thing is that personality piece that he needs to work on. Being a little bit more warm, understanding, especially under stress. And that's why I talk about attachment theory. It's that under stress is how we see people's worst part coming out. But Uche overall, I have to be honest, I feel like he's kind of getting a bad edit. Sometimes people do. They're highlighting this. I also think he's got some great traits. And I think in terms of communication, I'll get to that later in my next video. He's got some promising things, and that's what I focus on. Uche overall, though, in terms of attachment style, classic attachment theory, we call it avoidant attachment. I call it independent. Why? Because that same person fears losing their independence. And that's why I call them independent. Okay, I'll leave it there with Uche. JP. Who is JP? I said in my last video that he was a green flag, that JP was just a nice guy. We're going to find out a little bit more, and we couldn't know that getting into it. He's a fireman. I think he's at the right point in his life that he clearly wants love. But we find out more that there are some wounds here, right? He had a mother that he said was very angry. So I also think that this is what makes JP a good guy. He chose firefighting. Firefighters are usually guys that have a soft heart. I know a lot of firefighters. I volunteer for a charity, the Alyssa Ann Rushburn Foundation. I know a lot of firefighters. They're good guys, right? They're usually, they can be very conservative though. And this is Texas. This is Houston, Texas. And we see how conservative he is by the flag. Okay, what's with the red and white and blue clothes and flag? It's in every scene. It's like, is he wiping his eyes at one point using the flag? So I can't help but notice all of these things. But for me, emotionally, the hurt that he went through by having an angry mother and then feeling so awful to want to take care of his sisters, I feel like he might sacrifice himself. And he has, now that I know him more, it feels to me like a little bit more of that anxious energy, that he really wants connection. But I don't know if he's boundaried enough, if he knows how to talk about himself from a place of confidence, because we see him crying pretty easily. And I get the feeling like he's just not worked through some of those childhood issues. Let me know what you think about JP. And JP, you got to learn how to spell Taylor. Okay. All right. Izzy. Izzy is on the same scale of Lydia and Johnie, and no wonder they're all attracted to each other. Okay. Izzy, for me, embodies the anxious attachment style in a man. I would call him Nervous Nick, because he's got that nervous kind of presentation. If you look at it, though, some things are working for Izzy. Okay, objectively, 3 women, at least, there might be more, are falling for Izzy. Why? He kind of reminds me of Shane, a little bit of Bartice. He's kind of giving me that vibe. But Izzy knows his way around a person. Why? He's flirtatious. He is not malicious, but he unconsciously is provocative, right? He talks about sex and what are you wearing? And the women are going to be drawn to that, especially when you compare him to somebody like Milton, who's not going to ask those questions, or even Uche, that Izzy is going to be verbal, right? His love language is verbal. He says, I need to know that you have gone out and sampled everyone else, and you choose me, and you tell me, and you want me, and you desire me. All the things that an anxiously attached person would say. Now, again, it's not malicious. he just wants to feel loved for himself. And we hear about his insecurities that he says, the woman at a bar takes off his cap and says, "Ew, you're bald." And so he's that second type of person, I say, goes on the show, who has their own kind of insecurity and wants desperately to connect on a more emotional kind of level, to see him for who he is. But Izzy, to me, feels a little salesy, and it works for some people, and it works for women to be interested in him because he's different. Okay, most of the guys, so most of the women are anxious. Most of the men are on the a little bit more avoidant spectrum. But Izzy, given that he's more verbal, is this breath of fresh air, and people think that that means you're emotionally available. And we're only going to find out over time whether, how, and if Izzy is emotionally available. But my read is that he's anxious. Okay, let's go to Milton. Milton, young, sweet, skinny. Oh my gosh, Milton. I'm like, oh, he just needs to grow. He just needs time. He's 24, 25 years old. But I think Milton can feel like a little bit of an older soul because he is a little bit more quiet. He's had some rough start. He's had a difficult childhood. He grew up in Japan, didn't do well in school, came here, but he's smart, right? And so sometimes tall people, and I don't know if at one point he was alluding to Marfans, because that's a condition for super tall people, may not live as long, but I don't know how tall he actually is. But also tall people, and I myself am tall, sometimes feel like people project onto you that you're older than you are, because you're not like, oh, you're so cute and little. You're like the tall person. You should know. People project that you're older, wiser than you are. But my worry about Milton is he just does not have the relationship experience. I'm looking at his Instagram. He looks like he's 14 in some of these pictures, him with his friends just playing video games. There's like an innocence to Milton. And I just feel like he's going to be great, but he just needs some time. So his energy to me reads a little bit more avoidant, but because of the lack of experience. I'm going to leave it there. I just feel like I don't have enough of a read on Milton. Okay, let's go to Chris. I think Chris, objectively, is probably one of the better looking guys here. Okay. He is a nice looking guy. He's, I guess, a personal trainer. He, again, is of the marrying years. He really seems like a good guy. But a little bit like Johnie, I feel like he doesn't have enough oomph. Like he needs a little bit more of Izzy. He needs a little bit more bravado, a little bit more confidence, because there's something that I feel like he's just on his heels. Like the other women are initiating, and it's hard to feel completely, you get the friend vibe from Chris. It's hard to feel like, I am a man, and you are beautiful to me, and there's something kind of missing there for me. So, but on other objective levels, he reminds me of Cole. He reminds me of Paul. Nice guys, but not a lot of swag. And so therefore these guys don't do great in a Love is Blind situation, because they're objectively, again, attractive people, but sometimes that doesn't convert in terms of the confidence that's necessary. Okay, so let me land the plane here, because in my next video, I want to get into what works and what doesn't. But at this point, I'm seeing predominantly the women have anxious attachment styles, which makes sense to me. They're the people who go on these shows. The men, a little bit more on the avoidant kind of cool side, except for Izzy, who I think is an anomaly here, and that's why the women like him, because he feels emotionally available. And it all comes down to your childhood. Okay. But here's the thing. If this is you, and you're an anxious woman, and you want love, but you identify with Johnie, and you've had hurts, or Aaliyah, or Lydia, or even Taylor, all different mixes of the same, you just want to move towards secure. You're not going to have to be perfect to find love, because you could be in therapy for a long time and never get there. you want to be secure enough, and I want you to leave with this one message. Okay, this is what I call my love lesson or reality check. I'm looking in the mirror here, in the heart mirror, and I say, I might just be leading with the wrong things. I'm leading with too much hurt and not enough fun, playfulness. Like I need a balance, a blend of that, more like the Stacy kind of mix of those. Okay, if I'm a guy and I'm leading with more avoidance, I might need to be more vulnerable, okay, if I want to find love, because everyone's going to want more from me. I'm not giving enough. You know, the women are coming at you, and what do women want in these heterosexual relationships? They want more initiation from the man. That's why dating sucks, because the women feel like they're doing all the work. And they want to feel special, and they need that coming from the man. And if you're not good with words, then you got to do it with actions, or like leading with something, or play a game, or, you know, give them something and start a conversation that way. But those avoidant men have their work too, which is to learn how to share, and then share the right things that build connection in the right time with the right pace. Which I'm going to get to all of that in my next video. At this point, let me know what you think about attachment theory. Does it help you have any clarity on what you're watching and seeing and why people are behaving the way that they are? I don't want to just call somebody a red flag. I don't want to call them a mess. I want to explain where, when, how people become the way that they are and how they can get better. Okay, let me know what you think. Give me some feedback, and then stay tuned for part 2 coming up.